Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Good morning to you. Hump day, middle of the week, downhill slide. I could see it from here, almost there for Friday. Also, of course, a quick reminder before we get into all of today's stuff that I will be off all of next week. I know normally I just take Thursday and Friday off for Thanksgiving, but I got a lot of things on my plate. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, also off. So I'm off the air all of next week. You'll have alternate programming in all the different markets across the state. And then I will be returning to the airwaves on Monday, December the 2nd. So you guys will have a happy turkey week all without me. And then we'll be into the Christmas time already. So that'll be exciting and it'll be fun and entertaining. So I hope you guys are all ready for that. Coming up on today's program, we have got a bunch of stuff, including in just a few moments, we're going to be talking with Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine about tariffs. Oh, it'll be terribly exciting. Tariffs will be on the thing, and some of the problems with them, some of the pros, some of the cons. We'll be discussing that here in just a few minutes. And then Mike Shower, State Senator Mike Shower, should be joining us in hour two. But before we go any further, let's get down to it. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening down there in my adopted hometown of Homer. It's almost like they're the big city now. No, not really. But Victra, Verizon's largest authorized retailer, is now opening down in Homer, and they've got a big grand opening celebration happening tomorrow at noon. They're doing a big ribbon cutting with the chamber and everything else, and we're going to get some details on all about that and what's happening. Joining us is James Smith, who is the general manager for Victra across the state of Alaska. So let's bring him on board and see what he has to say this morning about this and more. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
You know, I can't complain. It's any day above ground is a good day, right? I mean, that's what it's
Yes,
that's what they say. So James, tell us a little bit about first and foremost, the event that's coming up tomorrow. Then we'll get into a little bit of a history lesson, I guess, here about what you guys are doing and what's going on. So tell us about tomorrow.
So we'll be having a couple of RSVPs and some, I believe the Chamber of Commerce. We'll be starting the event around noon. We'll be having some snack foods and some a ribbon cutting as well shortly thereafter the noon start time. Then we'll just be doing some refreshments, mingling, kind of talking to the community, get some networking in there, and let them know what we have to offer from Verizon, especially this being the holiday season. Some of our best in class opportunities to get new service or upgrade existing service, things like that. So that's kind of the short and sweet rundown of all of it for tomorrow.
Okay. Tell me a little bit here about, because obviously we've heard of Verizon, but tell us a bit about Victra. I mean, what is Victra? Who are you? Where'd you come from? Give us a little bit of background here.
Sure. So we are the nation's largest Verizon authorized retailer. We have somewhere over 1,700 stores nationwide, 6 of which are right here in Alaska. And then we are headquartered out of Raleigh, North Carolina. So just about as far on the other end of the country as you could be over there on the East Coast.
Right. And you guys have been doing Verizon phones for a long time, and you decided to come into Alaska, and you're expanding And of course, this is a new deal. What made you guys pick Homer? What's special about Homer down there? Since people all over the state are listening right now, what are you guys doing down there?
It's not just Homer, but it's definitely specifically down there on the Kenai Peninsula in general. We actually opened our Soldotna store last year in, I believe, around September. And then we did a relocation of our Eagle River location up near Anchorage there just a couple months ago. Actually, as we celebrated our 10th year anniversary. And then, of course, now we've got Homer. There's been a lot of expansion on the Kenai Peninsula with our network and towers. And just a lot of good opportunity to expand with home internet and then just better wireless service for the community. So the timing was right. And we haven't opened up a lot of stores even within the company in the last few years, but there's a lot of attention on Alaska right now and just seeing what we can do to further support the community and all their communication needs.
Well, in Alaska, we like having more choices because we usually are the ones that are at the sticky end of the stick as far as pretty limited choices when it comes down to that. What about your expansion? Are you expanding in all of Alaska? Is there more expansion plans? Give us a little bit of background there.
So there's nothing specific on the books as far as I couldn't tell you like number of towers or anything like that. But like I said, with the celebration of the 10 years, they're just continuing on. The foundation's there in most of it, but it's just about actually solidifying the consistency, the stability, and making sure there's just less drop calls, more consistent speeds. And one of the big areas is definitely in our home internet, because we do have a great option for home internet with our consumer, or we also have some great business options as well for our business customers. We have a lot of small business customers, obviously in Homer and the state of Alaska. And it's just getting more stability to give them options to use our services across the peninsula here, and of course, the rest of the state.
No, I mean, obviously, the internet is integral to. I mean, this program is broadcast to radio stations via the internet, and then, of course, to Facebook and YouTube. And so, internet is, it's imperative that businesses have great access to that. And we haven't had the greatest track record in the state sometimes with internet service. So, hopefully, this is something that you can offer people rollouts on everything else. Tell us a little bit about what Verizon and Victra can offer. What sets you apart from the competition?
Just having in our brick and mortar stores, especially having one in Homer now, just having a team of experts that really gets that right fit and actually can help with questions, whether they be technical questions about how to figure out how to turn your phone off silent, something simple as that, or some really hardcore stuff of the connectivity's gone because the eSIM, got knocked out, which is something that's in the newer technology of phones. But we have people that are very well trained. They actually have, whole universities they go through before they actually start helping guests. And then they're assisted by, great team leaders and other more tenured associates. We even had some strike team people come out from the lower 48 from some of our more tenured stores just to help open up the building. And then we're also bringing a couple from our Anchorage and Soldotna for the grand opening tomorrow to make sure we just have that support while we're still getting all the new people hired on and trained. All that to be said, just to make sure we have the right answers for the questions our guests have to make sure we can solve their problems.
Yeah, no, I mean, technicals, that's the other thing is I hate walking into a store with a technical question and they look at me blankly like they have no idea what's going on. We need, everybody needs to wear a bunch of different hats and do a little bit of everything, whether it's just selling me a phone or explaining to me how something works. I like to be able to have a little bit of technical information to get that stuff done. What should people expect to see when they go there tomorrow? It's just kind of a meet and greet, a get to know you, the ribbon cutting, some food, come out and see them. But what should we expect from you guys in the future? What do we, what else should we give us a sneak peek of what we should see coming down the road here in Alaska and down on the peninsula specifically?
Just further growth within the team. We've got a mostly new team there now, but just continuing to expand out within the business community and just kind of further outreach within the community. I know it was really, really proud moment for us last year when we opened Soldotna. We got to send 2 teachers to the Ron Clark Academy from the community. So just further integration within Homer and just kind of learn about the local awesomeness of it, and continue to kind of learn about what those guests need specifically, because we want to be that neighborhood store. We've done it in Soldotna, and we want to make sure people know we are the place to go to for family and friends. And then, like I said, for local businesses as well, we want to be that one-stop shop. And we just have so many offerings that I'm sure a lot of people, in Alaska and outside of Alaska, don't know we have, whether it be on the consumer or the business side, that we want to further educate people just so they know how we can just further simplify their life by making sure we can handle the technical parts, so they can just do that day-to-day living.
No, I'm very interested in like some of the mobile internet possibilities for businesses and stuff like that, because I know that is it's a big thing, whether it's a food truck or somebody who's doing, vendor shows or something like that. I'm really interested in seeing some of the things that you guys have to offer. So looking forward to seeing what you bring to the community down there, and hopefully folks come out and check it out. Again, it is the opening of the brand new Victra Verizon store down in Homer. It's going to be at 601 East Pioneer Avenue, Suite 209. That's in the Ketchimack Bay building there with all the little colored stores right next to North Rim Bank. Tomorrow, starting at noon from 1 p.m. And like you said, there's going to be light refreshments. There's going to be some giveaways, including, I just saw this, a complimentary portable power bank charger to the first 50 guests through the door. So be there early if you want to get your portable power bank, right? All right, James, any final thoughts here before I let you go? Final wrap up on what you guys have or where you want to go?
Nothing in particular, just excited that we get to open up this time of year. We got Black Friday coming up next week, so we got a lot of big promotions. I know of specific one or two that actually start tomorrow for some internet deals that we're going to give some freebies away with internet activation. So more to come there. I'll definitely be very excited to tell everybody about it at the event. But just some great stuff for, hey, you just sign up for your, already going to be great service, and we're just going to give you some free stuff that you're going to probably want anyways as well. So yeah, cool stuff.
He tells me this while I'm stuck in Wasilla. I can't drive down to. All right, that's fine. That's fine. All right. Well, anybody in Homer, you want to get a chance to get some good free stuff, or one of the phone bank chargers, you just come out and see some of the great deals that they've got over there at the new Victra Verizon store, again at 601 East Pioneer Avenue, and Suite 209. Tomorrow at noon, Chamber's going to be there. It's going to be like a full community deal. James Smith, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on board and joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
All right, folks. We got to go. We've got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Up next, Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine will be joining us, and we'll be talking with him about tariffs. Oh, it's going to be exciting. I can't wait. We'll be back with more after this. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right. So I hope you're going to head on down there tomorrow at noon and get your chance to get your hands on all that good stuff, plus all the good deals that are going on down there at the Victra Verizon store in Homer. They hit me with that at the last minute. I'm like, we're going to talk about that. That's going to be fun, and we got to get that. We got to get that done. All right. I see that in the green room we have Mr. Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine. He's getting ready to join us, so we're going to test his audio here in just a hot second, and then we're going to get into the fascinating topic of tariffs. Now, I know that last week or the week before, I mentioned tariffs and how I thought that there were some real problems with them. And one of our callers called in and said, how dare I question the wisdom of our president who's playing fifth dimensional chess with everybody else, and this is going to be the way to solve the problems. But I think there's more to it. I think there's more to it there. And so we're going to talk about that here in just a moment with Eric Boehm and get that squared away. Let me get caught up in the chat room real quick before I bring Eric on. He's waiting patiently in the wings here. We're going to get into some details and talk about it. But first, I just want to get caught up. You guys have been busy this morning. This show is packed today. I mean, it is literally from start to finish, guests wall to wall, and we got a lot of stuff going on. So it's all good morning, good morning, good morning. Hi, Dad. My dad is up in the interior, hopefully staying warm. It was 30 below in Fairbanks yesterday. But of course he lives up on the hill, so a little bit warmer for them overall. Brian says, wait, there's a silent mode. There's a silent mode on your phone? Yes, Brian, there is. And there's also a do not disturb mode on your phone. You can do. I discovered that the minute that I turned my phone on, and I was like, I love this. I can just turn it off. And Anthony says, what? Victra offers local tech support and not some man claiming to be Dan Smith talking to me from a call center in the caves of Afghanistan. My favorite one is, hello, my name is Robert. How may I help you? I don't think your name is Robert. I'm just saying, I don't think your name is Robert. I just want to throw that out there. just in case you were missing here. Bill says there's no such thing as free stuff. Well, I mean, technically you're right. Eventually somebody has to pay for it, but you could get it for free. If you're one of the first 50 people to show up over there, you could get yourself a free charging bank plug brick thing. You know what I mean? You could do that. And then Frank corrects me, of course, because Frank always has to correct me. It was only 24 below in Fairbanks yesterday. Well, I don't know. Somebody yesterday morning said it was 28 below at their house when we were talking yesterday morning. So I guess it depends on where you live. When I lived in Fairbanks, I lived in that hole on the other side of North Pole that it was a little bit of a depression. It was always 5 degrees colder than anywhere else in North Pole. So I'm sure probably somewhere it was 30 below yesterday, Frank. But, you do you, boo. All right, let's go over to Eric and make sure his audio is working and everything's good, and we'll get started on this here in just a second. We're about to rejoin the radio. Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine. Hello, my friend. It's good to see you again.
Michael, it's good to see you. Thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me.
Well, I can hear you. Yep, and I appreciate you, sir. I know that you're a very, very busy guy. You got lots of stuff going on, but this has been a topic that's been near and dear to my heart as I've been watching a lot of this discussion during the presidential election, and I keep looking at my TV and grabbing the sides of it and going, stop. This is going to cost us something. And so anyway, I'm glad I can bring somebody on who's been deep into this. And I had to laugh yesterday because I told people, I said, I tried to get you on yesterday or on Monday, but
yeah.
You were so busy that you were actually moderating a debate on tariffs. So, I thought that was I picked the right guy to bring on and talk a little bit about tariffs. You've got some background on this. So I'm looking forward to that.
This is the one and only thing. I mean, it's actually not the one and only thing I cover, but it's, one of my favorite things to cover. So was that the bell? Do we need to go? We got to go. Class is up. Class is over. Yeah.
Yeah. About 15 seconds now. We may sneak in something on the Jones Act too at the end, because that's my favorite topic.
Let's go.
All right, we're gonna continue on here. Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine, our guest. If you can, please like and share the show, like and follow the show page. There's the second warning. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, and of course Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else. Joining us now is Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine. He is a writer and a reporter for Reason. He also has appeared in, pretty much every major publication you've ever heard of: the Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, Real Clear Politics, the Washington Examiner, Chicago Sun-Times, and more. I brought Eric on because he's been writing about this for a while, and we heard a lot about it, but I don't think people really understand how it works and what it means for Americans. And I'm talking about tariffs. I know it's not a very sexy topic, but it is an expensive topic because it could cost us, Americans specifically, a lot of money. But it's been touted as the magic bullet to fix our economy and our tax problems and everything else. Joining us right now to discuss is Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning to you, Michael. Thank you for having me. I'm always glad to talk with you and with the fine folks in the state of Alaska. Wish I was there, honestly.
Well, didn't you just hear that it was 30 below in some places?
That sounds great. I love winter. Let's go.
It's a balmy 8 degrees where I'm at, so it's not too bad. In Alaska, where we still don't know the outcome of our election, right?
Yeah.
It's still it's so frustrating. But Eric, you've been writing about tariffs for quite a while, and in fact, you've covered a lot of my favorite topics, the Jones Act and many other things that directly affect Alaska. And we keep hearing this thing about tariffs that, like I said, there's some kind of magic bullet. Like they're going to fix all the problems that we have, the inequity of trade. They're going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. And don't worry, you're not going to pay. Those people behind the tree, the other tree will pay. The Chinese will pay, or Canadians will pay, or whoever. But again, anyone who's ever really, and Chris says it, anyone who's ever really studied economics knows that tariffs have got some universally bad things attached to them, especially in maybe 200 years ago, but in an interconnected worldwide economy where things are transiting, partially manufactured, then sent somewhere else to be completed. And then it's a complete different thing these days. So let's talk a bit about tariffs and then what President Trump is proposing.
Yeah, sure. You did a great job right there. There's nothing more for me to say. Let's start with there's two things that you talked about there. One is the kind of the consequences that tariffs are promised to bring about, right? The manufacturing revolution or something. It could bring jobs back. Let's put that on the back burner for just a second. That's sort of the second order effect, right? Let's talk about the first thing that tariffs do. The thing that tariffs do is they impose taxes on Americans. It's an import tax. You bring something into the country from another country, depending on what the product is and what the tariff rate for that product from a certain place is. That tariff gets attached to that product as it gets brought into the country. Trump's actually talking about makes it quite simple because, he wants to put a 20% tariff or a 40% tariff on everything that comes in. And if that's the case, then, you can just add 20% to the cost of whatever is coming into the country. That cost gets passed down along the supply chain the same way any tax does. It's ultimately paid by people at the end of that supply chain. And so that's, at the end of the day, that's who's paying for tariffs. It's not China. It's not importing companies or something like that. It's not corporations. It's people who go to the store and buy tariffed products that just gets built in there. And, this is obviously there's economic theory that says this, but then it's not just theory anymore. We've actually had a really helpful real world experiment over the last several years since Trump put a number of tariffs in place during his first term. Biden kept most of those in place, actually added a few more, kind of tightened some of the tariffs on steel and aluminum coming in from Mexico and some other places. And so there've been numerous studies. I don't want to bore your listeners with numbers because numbers don't work well on the radio, but there have been lots of studies. Trust me, I've seen them all at this point, saying that it's not just economic theory that says people pay the tariffs. It is reality. The one I think that's maybe the most important study of the bunch that came out was one done by the International Trade Commission, the very government entity that is responsible for imposing the tariffs in the first place. And their conclusion after looking at, I think it was 4 years of data on the Trump tariffs was that, actually Americans paid almost all of the costs except for a few, couple percentage points here and there that were picked up elsewhere. So Americans pay for tariffs. That is settled fact.
Well, this is the same logic. We just had a ballot measure in the state that has passed, and it's going to go into effect in 2 years for a new minimum wage, plus paid leave for everybody, for every small business and everything else like that. People are like, "Oh, this is great. This will be good." And I'm like, "Okay, well, one, either you're going to have to pay for it as a consumer, an end-use consumer, or these businesses are going to go out of business. They can't absorb those kind of costs, And it's kind of the same theory here. No company that's building something and buying steel from overseas or aluminum from overseas is going to just suck up a 20% increase and not pass that on to the end use consumer after they manufacture their widget or whatever. It's the same kind of thing, right? I mean, it immediately goes out there. And this changes too, because again, as I mentioned earlier, we're different. When tariffs were first, utilized in America back, in near its founding 240 years ago, it may have made sense because we were self-contained. We were, we kind of did our own thing. We mined our own steel. We had all these other things. And so it was a form of protectionism to keep foreign steel, for example, from coming to our shores where maybe it was cheaper. And they're like, no, we want to keep things here. But in some cases, we're not even making these things anymore. We become a global worldwide market where we may be outsourcing certain components of it and then assembling it here. And it's not something that seems to make sense anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I would even push back against that a little bit. We still make lots of things in this country. In fact, like industrial manufacturing output is higher than it's ever been. We don't have as many manufacturing jobs anymore, and that's largely a function of automation, not the China shock or anything like that. That's mostly what's happened with manufacturing jobs. But we do still make lots of things in this country. But what we need to we make a lot of finished products. We don't make a lot of we don't have a lot of raw material manufacturing. We don't have a lot of the low level manufacturing. So I think a car is probably the best example of this, right? We make lots of cars in the United States. We always have. We make more now than ever before because we also have, BMW plants in South Carolina and Toyota plants all over the country. Foreign car companies have invested here. But we don't make all the components for those cars in the United States. We import those components, whether that means the raw steel and aluminum. It means some of that. It also means a lot of the actual individual parts. And then the final assembly is done here. And that's good, provides lots of good paying jobs for Americans. But when you start to put tariffs on the raw materials and on all those little parts and bits and pieces that have to go into a car, and you end up increasing the cost by a little bit here and there, and that all adds up, obviously, and ultimately is going to be paid by the end consumer, or is going to come out of corporate profits, or is going to come out of workers' paychecks in some way, shape, or form, just like any other tax increase does. I think it's funny because, the point you just made there, like conservatives understand this when you talk about regulatory costs, right? They understand that if you burden a company with higher regulatory costs, or you require that a company provides free childcare or something like that to its employees, that those costs get passed down the corporate ladder, or get passed down the supply chain in some way, shape, or form. But for some reason, when it comes to tariffs, it seems like a lot of conservatives, I think, have selective amnesia or selective blindness about the way in which this works. And that's a problem.
Yeah, no, I think willful blindness is a perfect term for what we've got going on. As long as it's somebody else's thing, I'm upset about it. But as long as it's my guy's thing, then I'm okay with it. And you just mentioned the manufacturing, because that was what they said. You want, again, make America great again, which I'm all for. But this idea that somehow we can bring all the manufacturing that over the last 100 years has drained out of America, like you said, raw material manufacturing, base level metal, all these kind of things, that just, I don't even know if it could be done. First of all, you'd have to stand up whole new industries again here in America and everything else. So effectively, all you're doing is you're just forcing people to pay more for things that they already want. You'd probably have to double or triple the price to make it sensible to stand all those industries up and tool up and do all that kind of stuff here. It doesn't make any sense in a global economy.
Yeah, that's exactly what you'd have to do. You'd have to make everything a lot more expensive to make that economic prospect work. And so go back to what we talked about at the beginning about tariffs, right? What do? They raise prices. That's the one and only thing they can do. And the goal of tariffs is to raise domestic prices high enough so that you effectively undercut cheaper foreign goods. And you do create these economic incentives maybe to have more stuff made here. But you have to raise those prices a lot. And I think that's another piece of this discussion that gets missed. J.D. Vance, back during the presidential campaign, he was, for a while in his stump speech, he had this line about how we don't make toasters in the United States anymore. We import these cheap toasters made in China or made in other places around the world. And that this is a problem. We should be making toasters in the United States. Well, Ed Gresser, who's a former assistant U.S. trade representative, and now he works at a trade policy think tank in D.C., he went and he tried to crunch the numbers on okay, how much would it cost the consumer if you had a toaster that was entirely made in the United States, completely from component parts all the way up to the finished product. And we honestly, we don't make toasters in the United States. There are none. He couldn't find any. But there are some boutique brands that make toasters and other small scale kitchen appliances in Europe. And they do this entirely within the same, within the European trade market.
Right.
And the cost of those toasters is like $200 to $300. They're high-end boutique models. Now, if you want to spend $300 on a toaster, be my guest. And some people do. Obviously, these companies exist that make these in Italy and France and other places. And maybe they would exist in the United States if you hiked tariffs so high that a $50 toaster at Home Depot is now going to cost $200, an imported toaster. Then, okay, sure, you might create the economic environment where some company is going to take a chance on investing in building a toaster factory in the United States. But the consequences of that is that every American who needs to buy a toaster is now going to be out $200 to $300 to buy a new toaster, instead of being able to go down to Home Depot and get a new one for $40 or $50 when yours breaks, which is really nice, actually. And so I don't think we appropriately value how good having plentiful, cheap stuff is. And it's not just cheap plastic crap, as this stuff often gets talked about. It is kitchen appliances. It is stuff that actually makes your life better and easier and more affordable. And so the trade-offs there are they're really dramatic. And I don't think that part gets talked about enough by the people who are pushing tariffs. Obviously, they don't want to talk about that because those are the types of costs you would have to impose to make this sort of economic prospect work.
Now, on the plus side, if you did buy a $200 toaster or $300 toaster, you probably would be able to pass it on to your kids. It may have been that level of quality. Right?
No, that's true. Yeah, sure. It might be a good investment.
It might be a good investment.
I don't know how well they hold their value. Yeah.
But yeah, it would be a tough thing. And of course, all this has costs. Now, economist Donna Ardwin is in the chat room today. She says Trump's economic teams knows well the economics of tariffs. If he uses them as a strategic negotiating tactic for foreign policy benefits, I get it. But I guess the question is, has that worked out? Has that worked out? We have 4 years of data, now 8 years of data, because Biden kept most of them. So has that worked out as a strategic stick, so to speak, against a lot of these manufacturers or a lot of these countries?
Yeah, you hear versions of this argument all the time about it's not, it's not really about the economics. It's really about leverage, or it's about convincing somebody to sign a trade deal. And I'm just, for one, no, I really haven't seen any evidence of this. We did get that sort of kind of fake supposed phase one trade deal that the U.S. signed with China during Trump's first term, but that completely blew up during COVID, and then Trump was out of office, and China didn't live up to any of the promises that it made in terms of purchasing U.S. goods. So that, for all intents and purposes, if that deal was ever meant to be real, it effectively is not real today. So we really just haven't seen any of this. But I think even just the logic of this kind of baffles my mind a little bit, because the argument here is that, okay, we should raise tariffs to where, maybe other countries are charging higher tariffs than we are. So we should raise our tariffs to then convince them to negotiate to lower theirs. And it's like, I don't understand how copying somebody else's bad behavior is going to convince them to change. And that doesn't seem like a model to do something. If you have a friend who makes a bunch of really bad personal financial decisions, like they always have a ton of credit card debt, the way you're going to convince them to change their ways is not by blowing your own credit card too, right? And then be like, oh, look, we're both in the same boat. Now we can change together. I don't know. I just don't understand how that theory works.
Right.
And if another country is charging higher tariffs than us and we raise ours to match, why wouldn't their response just be to raise theirs? Clearly that country prefers a status quo where their tariff rates are higher than ours.
Right.
They're not going to go down. They're going to go up. So it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and that's why there was the tariff wars, right? I mean, there was a phrase where there was tariff wars. It has happened in the past. This is not abstract theoretical stuff. It's actually gone on in the past. Yeah. Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine is our guest. We're coming up on the break. In the next segment, I want to talk about the actual cost, because Eric has actually pulled some of this stuff out. He's got an article up on Reason that asks how much will Trump's tariffs cost, and you can read that for yourself, but we're going to go over some of the details of it. I posted up the link in the chat room right now. We're going to continue here in just a moment with Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine. Back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return to more in just a moment.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now with Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine, our guest. And, let me go. There's been a couple of comments here that I haven't read all the way through. Tariffs as scare tactics, says Kim. I mean, yes, that's the theory. But again, how does it work out, in reality? We're using it as leverage. He's playing fifth dimensional chess. He's doing all these other things. And I'm just saying that I think that that in theory, maybe that's what you try and do. GR Hill over on Rumble says, I think Ben Shapiro has the best take on tariffs. He thinks Trump's is using tariffs as leverage, not solely money making for the government. What's the cost difference between income taxes versus? I mean, again, that's what we were talking about. That's the theory we keep hearing, is that he'll use this as the stick instead of the carrot to get things going. But there's nothing stopping them from tit for tat. And that's why we ended up with tariff wars 200 years ago because of this exact same thing.
You don't even have to go back 200 years ago. You go back to the 1960s and 1970s. There was a little skirmish, little tariff war between the U.S. and Europe over frozen chicken, weirdly enough, because that was actually once upon a time kind of a delicacy in Europe. And we had more developed agriculture. We had a lot more chicken here. We could export a lot of chicken pretty cheaply to Europe because we had new refrigeration technology. And the European farmers hated this. They were really grumpy about American frozen chicken coming over and undercutting, their, domestic French hens or whatever they have over there. And so there were actually a series of tariffs, sort of the early version of what is today the European Union, put a bunch of tariffs on American frozen chicken. And in retaliation for that, the United States put tariffs on light trucks and a bunch of other things, bunch of European products, but particularly light trucks, targeting Volkswagen, the Volkswagen like hippie van, right? And other Volkswagen products, other Volkswagen vehicles. And the result of that is that, eventually most of this got resolved. We still have this high tariff on trucks. We still have a 25% tariff on light trucks. And that has completely warped the American pickup truck market. Like you have a very difficult time finding a foreign-made pickup truck. You can buy foreign sedans in the U.S. Can't buy a foreign pickup truck because they're just too expensive. So American consumers.
You mean European foreign-made?
I mean European. Sorry, European-made pickup truck, and that's American consumers actually lose out here in a way that maybe you don't even realize, you don't think about,
right.
But it just like limits your choice, it limits selection, it limits competition, and it obviously drives up price. It's one of the reasons why pickup trucks are so expensive in this country.
Right.
Not all. I mean, there's a lot of environmental reasons why they are too, because of stupid regulations. I don't want to, overstate the tariff thing here, but it's a factor for sure.
It's a big Well, 25%. It's a pretty big knock.
It's a big tariff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Mark says, what you're talking about is all luxury items. When demand goes down, prices will drop. You're not factoring in the drop in demand. But we're not just talking about luxury items. I mean, literally, we're talking about, if you think a toaster is a luxury item, anything that's manufactured overseas or utilizes overseas components like steel, aluminum, things like that, it's not just like it will be in every lumber. There was a lumber tariff in Canada right after COVID, right? I mean, and what did it do to the lumber price? You want to build a birdhouse or a doghouse for your, it's not just luxury items.
This is one of the things that gets me is like both parties right now, I think, have finally gotten it through their heads that like, oh, there's a problem with housing in the United States, right? We don't have enough housing. And I know maybe this maybe isn't as important of an issue in Alaska, where you guys have so much space and you can just build as much as you want. But there's definitely like a housing problem here. Housing is too expensive. Okay, well, we've got tariffs on steel, which you need to build housing. We've got tariffs on lumber, which you need to use to build housing. We've got tariffs on lots of the other stuff that you have to put in a house. We've got tariffs on appliances that you need to, we have washing machine and dryers that are subject to tariffs thanks to Trump. and that you gotta buy to put in your house to make it, maybe you don't need one of those in your house, but certainly makes it more livable. And then it's like, well, why is housing so expensive? I wonder what it could be. And again, there are other factors here. There's lots of other things. There's zoning rules, there's regulations, there's environmental stuff, all of that. But if you make lumber and steel more expensive, the stuff you build with lumber and steel is going to be more expensive. There's just no way around that. Yeah.
Everything's going to be more expensive. So on a side note, Bill says, is that a Howard Miller clock made in Zeeland, Michigan, sitting on the shelf in the background? So that's the one on
one back here.
Yeah.
It is. It may be, actually. I would need to investigate. I think that clock is originally from Germany, but I'm actually not sure.
Interesting. Charlie says, it's my understanding that the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were a major contributing factor to the Great Depression, which I think some economists have said that in referencing the Great Depression.
Yeah, I think the general view on that is that they worsened it. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs were passed in 1930, so the crash had already happened, but that they significantly slowed the recovery and kind of deepened the recession. Or deepen the depression. Yeah. All
right. Well, we're going to talk about some actual numbers and the actual cost to Americans in this next segment.
Chalkboard. Let's go.
Yep, get it out. Let's do the whiteboard here. Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine, is our guest. He's a reporter over there. It covers a lot of very interesting topics, although they do get a little bit into the weeds on things, but that's what I appreciate about him as well. We're going to talk about the actual cost of the tariffs, but this is an interesting question that just came in from Kim in the chat room. It said, if Trump's tariffs didn't work, why did the Biden-Harris administration keep them in place? Eric, this is a great question, and I think this is about the universalism of political of politics, I guess is what I would say at that point. Yeah.
I would say that the main reason why the Biden-Harris administration kept Trump's tariffs in place is other political reasons. Had nothing to do with the economics, had nothing to do with whether they worked or not, but just had to do with the fact that there are one of the things that happens when you create tariffs, when you raise tariffs, is you create political constituencies to keep those things in place. You create certain industries or certain sectors that benefit from them, and then they lobby hard to keep them. And so it's difficult to dislodge bad trade policy for exactly this reason. And you also have the fact that tariffs and trade protectionism has kind of historically been a Democratic or a left-wing priority. So you had Trump kind of, crossing over and in his appeal to the working class and his, the kind of ways in which he's reshaped Republican politics here, he brought in some of these traditionally, historically left-wing ideas. So then to look at it and say, hey, why didn't the Democrats repeal this policy that the Democrats have actually favored for most of their, most of the past 100 years or so? Well, they're not going to do it because they like it. They have constituents that like that, unions and other sort of, political factors like that. So there's a lot of reasons why, but I think that's probably the chief one.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the numbers because they are a little bit shocking when you actually look down into it. And again, there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of, hyperbolic talk about what tariffs can and cannot do. But the bottom line is that most experts are agreeing that this is going to cost the American consumer in the end. And in fact, estimates, you say in your article, of the proposed tariffs would reduce the consumer spending power in America by somewhere between $46 to $78 billion every year. And it's got a real true effect on American families. Walk me through it here.
Yeah, so that number comes from a new report by the National Retail Federation, and that's actually not even looking at the full cost of the tariffs. It's looking at just things that consumers buy directly. So it's kind of even taking out some of the knock-on effects on industrial inputs and stuff that we talked about in the first segment. That report was looking exclusively at the products that would be tariffed, including things like travel goods, home goods, shoes, clothing, stuff like that. One thing to consider here is that, there's actually quite a bit of variety in these proposals or in these estimates, because we don't quite know exactly what these tariffs will look like. Trump has floated a 10% tariff plan, 20% tariff plan, a 60% tariff on goods exclusively from China. There's been talk about whether this would be maybe done as a bill that passes through Congress or whether it would be done through executive order. All of that still needs to be sorted out. So we don't really know the costs. But when you look at, and in that same article, I posted a nice sort of handy chart in there that was put together by my friends at the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, where they summarize, I think it's 10 different studies that have been done looking at different permutations of what this tariff plan could look like, 10% or 20% or 60% on China or whatever. And the conclusions are, a little bit different from one another, but the conclusion across the board is that American consumers are going to be paying more. The American Action Forum says, $3,900 annual cost to consumers. The Center for American Progress, that's a group more on the left, they came to basically the same number, $3,900 annually. The Peterson Institute says $2,600 annually. The Tax Foundation says $268 billion all told for the country, rather than, per household. So you can look at all the numbers on there, but I think the general conclusion here from economists, left, right, center, trade experts, tax experts, doesn't matter who you talk to, the answer is Americans will be paying more.
Now, there's two different ways that tariffs can be implemented. One is through executive action, right? An executive order or something, which is what Trump did, which gave Biden the opportunity to reverse them, even though he didn't reverse most of them. Yep. And the second one is the legislative component of it. And of course, the legislative component looks kind of sexy because I know Trump has been talking about floating a tariff that's massive enough that it actually replaces the income tax in America, which I can't even imagine what the cost to the American consumer of that would be. It would have to be it would have to be orders of magnitude larger than what we pay in income taxes, I would think.
The math on that just simply doesn't work. There's no one-to-one replacement tariff for income tax, because here's the problem you run into. You're right. You would have to raise tariffs massively high to pay for, to balance out the amount of money that the federal government gets from income taxes. And that as tariffs go higher, you end up reducing the amount of stuff that comes into the country, right? Because people will buy less stuff if you tax it so heavily. So there's a regressive effect there, kind of a negative feedback loop. Whereas tariffs go higher, the amount of goods that you're subjecting to tariffs fall. And so there's a pretty hard ceiling on how much revenue you can raise from tariffs. Trump talks about this as if we're going to go back to the 1890s. He's pretty fond of this. Late in his campaign, he talked about this in a bunch of his stump speeches. Back in the 1890s, there was no income tax. We funded the entire federal government with tariffs. And that sounds great. But back in the 1890s, the federal government spent about 3% of GDP. That keeping it constant, from then to now, the federal government spent the equivalent of 3% of America's GDP every year. Right now, we spend 24% on the government. So if we're going to cut the government back to 3% of GDP, yes, of course, I would sign up for that deal. Let's do it. But unless there's a plan to cut spending, you can't be serious about funding the government with tariffs, and not just cut spending a little bit, but I mean cut spending, 1/8 of what we pay for now, basically.
Right. And so Frank says, in a nutshell, tariffs are used for political advantages and not economy. And that's really the truth. It's really a political lever, whether it's a political ploy to tell people what they want or a way to try and threaten some other country. But again, as we were talking about earlier, that can lead to tariff wars back and forth. It's not going to bring manufacturing back into America because of the enormous stand-up cost of having to try and reinvent industries that have been gone from this country for decades. It would, the cost, if you had to make something 2 or 3 times what it would cost now to make it even affordable, I mean, it just makes no sense. This is the problem, in my opinion, with government getting involved in a lot of these free market things, where they're trying to manipulate the free market to create the perfect, in their mind, the perfect price point or the perfect this or the perfect that. Just let the market work. And because we are a global economy now, and things are being shipped in either whole pieces or parts or components or raw materials from all over the world to be manufactured all over the world, I think the time for tariffs is really kind of run its course. It really doesn't do anything but essentially, in the long run, hurt the consumer everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll leave you with this thought. I mean, it's not just about manufacturing stuff and making stuff. It's also about all of the things that we import that we literally can't grow here. right? I mean, you can say, well, we could, restart the plants and make toasters here again or whatever. But what about bananas? What about coffee? Those are two of the biggest imports in the United States. Bananas are the most popular fruit in the United States, the most popular item of produce. And if you imposed a 20% tariff on bananas, you'd be talking about charging Americans an extra $400 million a year cumulatively for your bananas. So a banana is cheap, right? You go to the grocery store, you get one for 80 cents or $1 or something like that. And it's not going to be that much more expensive, but in the aggregate, it adds up quite a bit. And then, coffee, I think, is the exact same thing. I heard your ad. You're running this radio show fueled by coffee. I'm fueled by coffee. All Americans, right, are drinking it every day. If you add, again, Trump's tariffs on coffee imports, and almost all coffee consumed in the United States is imported, then you're talking about $1.6 billion in additional costs. Again, it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there, it's a little bit out of your household budget. But I think anybody who's gone through the inflation of the last few years understands that a $1 increase in the price of your bag of coffee that you're picking up at the store, that adds up over the course of the year. And then, of course, it's not just the coffee and it's the bananas and it's the fish, maybe not in Alaska where you're getting that right there. But it's all the fruits, it's all the vegetables, it's all the stuff that we bring in from the rest of the world. And it hits you, I think, at the grocery store in ways that people are probably not prepared for.
All right. So final thoughts to people who are still confused or still, thinking, oh, but he's going to save us with these tariffs and everything else. So we got about 90 seconds here. Kind of your final summation on the overall thoughts on tariffs. What does it really mean? How, does it help? Does it not? Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of magical thinking, because what you do is you hear, it's gonna produce economic growth, or it's gonna bring businesses and industry back. And when you explain to somebody why that's not the case, then it's, oh, well, we're gonna fund the government with it. This is the way Trump has gone with these tariffs, right? It's always, if it's not one thing, then it's something else. Well, we're gonna bring back steel making jobs. Okay, that didn't work. Well, we're going to fund the government. We're going to replace the income tax. Okay, the math doesn't work on that either. Oh, well, we're going to use it for leverage to get trade deals with other countries. Okay, well, logically, that doesn't make sense either for the reasons we talked about. Copying somebody else's bad behavior isn't going to make them change, isn't going to make them lower their trade barriers. And so it seems like the justifications are constantly shifting. It seems like the math doesn't work. The underlying economics are flawed or faulty. We've now had a real world experiment that proves that Americans are ultimately the ones who pay for the tariffs. Honestly, this is a whole project that should just be scrapped. The Trump administration has a lot of good ideas, a lot of good pro-growth ideas about cutting regulations, about cutting the size of government, and that would do far more for the American economy and for everyday people than any of this tariff stuff. So this is, I think, at best, it's a distraction, and at worst, it's a serious economic problem.
Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine, thank you so much. Hold the line. Mike Shower up next, The Michael Duke Show. So I guess my final question to you, Eric, since we're just you, me, and 90 of our closest friends on the internet right now, is, why does he focus so much then on tariffs? If we know, and again, I think most serious economists look at it and can historically go, not great. Why does he continually focus on it? Why is this the cornerstone of a lot of his economic policies?
That is a question for Donald Trump himself. Honestly, this is something that is his idea, and it's been his idea for a long time. You go back, and I've written about this at Reason. You go back and look at interviews that he gave in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And, appearances where he wasn't even thinking about running for president, wasn't even thinking about, I don't think, any sort of political career in a serious way. And he would just kind of out of the blue bring up, well, we should have higher tariffs. Like, this is just something that he has believed for a long time. And now, obviously has been given the opportunity to implement. And it seems like it's one of these sort of core beliefs that nothing is going to shake. So I think the more concerning thing to me is not so much that Trump believes this, he's wrong, but he can believe whatever he wants. But it's that you've now had so much of the Republican establishment, think tanks and members of Congress and people in positions of power who have kind of like deluded themselves into thinking like, oh, yeah, maybe Trump's right about this, when it's just so evident that he's wrong. And so the willingness to kind of bend, the willingness to kind of engage in this magical thinking, I think, is a problem for conservatives generally, because it is, as I said earlier, it's the sort of thing that I think Republicans and conservatives would see right through. In most other contexts, they would say this is obviously big government. You're imposing costs. It has trickle down, negative consequences. All of that, and for whatever reason, that's not happening here.
Yeah, proposed by somebody else, they would probably be against it. But again, and Trump he's had some great ideas. He's had some great economic ideas. It's just he's stuck on this one that's going to end up costing us a ton of dough in the long run, if it gets, and not help us in the ways that they keep saying that they think it's going to help us. And that's just,
I do think, I guess the last thing I'll say real quick, I know you got to go, but I know that there is a sizable pushback from Senate Republicans on including any sort of tariff in the tax bill that needs to be done next year. So obviously the Trump tax cuts expire next year. There's going to be a huge, probably months-long negotiation over what that looks like going forward. And there's already been on the record a number of Republican senators who have come out and said, no, look, I know Trump wants to do tariffs as part of the tax bill as an offset or something for tax cuts, and that's just a complete non-starter. So I think it is good to see that from Senate Republicans basically saying, no, if we're going to do tariffs, we're going to handle that separately. We're not going to tie it up with the rest of the tax code, which would make it much harder to undo.
Because there was a lot of speculation, because by tying tariffs to the tax code, you could avoid the filibuster because it would be revenue neutral, so supposedly, and that would allow them to push it through a lot easier. But by tying those two things together, you've also created an even stickier quagmire down the road if you want to try and untangle it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's the thinking going on there. And I know even, from talking to people outside the Senate, people in kind of conservative policy wonkery world in DC, like the general sense is, well, if we're going to do tariffs, it's got to be its own thing. We're not going to let it get tied up with the tax bill, which is smart and good policy making. So sometimes there's a dearth of that in DC sometimes, but it is good to see that the loonies are not completely in charge yet.
Yeah, no, well, at least there is that. It'll be interesting to watch to see. There's, again, economist Donna Ardwin says there's no question that Eric is right or correct. Threatening tariffs is the same as threatening to stop spending so much money to foreign government. Nukes, border crossings, fentanyl require every arrow in the quiver. I mean, it's true. But again, and we can look back at the history of this. It's not like it, and it's the difference. We talk about this a lot on this program. It's the difference between theoretical and practical application. Things work so great. I mean, it's like some of our things we got here in this day. Oh, it works so great on paper. And then you put people into it and you realize this is a horrible idea. And it is just because of, human nature and greed and self-interest and everything else. And it just, that's the thing. In theory, tariffs would work great, but in practical application, and we have 200 plus years of, including the last 8 years to see, we know that it's not necessarily going to work out the way that they say it's going to work out.
Well, I guess the last point on the leverage thing too is that I kind of wonder, look, we've well established at this point that it's Americans who pay for the cost of the tariffs, right? So I really wonder about I'm going to impose higher taxes on my own people to punish you for the stuff that you're doing over there, in another country that I don't like. I don't understand that so much either. It's like, Michael, give me your wallet or I'll shoot myself in the foot.
Right.
How is that leverage on you? That's, okay.
They look at you and go, go ahead.
Yeah. Right. It's like, I don't fully understand it. So because the costs are domestic. So using it as leverage for foreign policy, I don't know. If I was the leader of another country, I think I would just look at Trump and say, sure, go ahead, buddy.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah. So I'm confused.
That's
by that.
what it's all about. Yeah. All right. Well, Eric Boehm, Reason Magazine, my friend, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you. We will have to do a Jones Act thing here pretty quick.
Yeah, let's do that again.
To talk about that again. It's good to have you on. Thanks for being part of it today.
Thanks so much, Michael. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Eric Boehm from Reason Magazine. Let me see if I can get the master of disaster here on the program. I saw him in the chat room here a minute ago, so let's see if he answers his telephone. And look at that. Looks like we got it going on. Are you with us? Are you awake? You ready?
I'm actually at the end of my first cup of coffee.
Oh man,
Yes, I am.
we are in danger. Danger, Will
Yes, you
Robinson.
are.
Danger. All right.
I haven't even spun up yet.
I haven't
Just
even.
wait.
Well, wait. Just wait. We'll get going on here. All right. Hold the line for just a second. Mike Shower is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common Sense, Liberty Base, Free Thinking Radio. We'll be back. Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the great state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. How you doing? You ready for hour 2? Hour 2 is right now, and we're going to be joined by State Senator Mike Shower as soon as I clear up with my morning PSA. My morning PSA, the public service announcement is for next week. I will be off the air next week. Now, Thursday and Friday, obviously Thanksgiving, so I would have normally taken those days off anyway, just like every other normal American out there. And but because I got a lot of stuff going on, I'm actually taking Monday through Wednesday off as well. So we will be off the air Monday through Friday of next week, and we will be returning to the airwaves on Monday, December the 2nd. So that's a week from this coming Monday. We will be back on the air, but all next week we will be off. I hope there'll be alternate programming. Hopefully you guys won't be too lonely. And hopefully by then we'll have the full complete rundown of everything that's happened with the elections. I mean, it'll only have been a month. I hope we have the full certification and everything else going on by that time. So we'll get into that. All right. Well, let's get into it here in hour 2 with State Senator Mike Shower, who joins us this morning to talk. We haven't talked to him since just before the election, and so now is the time to do it. Let's jump on board and get with it. Get with the program here and bring State Senator Mike Shower on the program. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I am doing just fine, my friend. How are you?
You know, it's just another beautiful. At least it's not below zero. It's been below
windy.
Well, it's not really windy where I'm at, but at least the last few days it's been below zero, and I'm like, oh man, I just can't. So I think it's like 5 degrees right now here at the old house. So I'm feeling a little bit warmer than I was, but and of course we got post-election discussions that have just been I mean, it's interesting. You'd think that 3 weeks after election, we still wouldn't be counting votes and, updating things on a daily basis and everything else. But, let's, I guess we could talk about the election to start off with and see where you're at on everything and the way things are going.
Oh, sure, because that won't take us a full hour.
Yeah. No,
So, well, it was. So Tuckerman is watching the show right now. I saw him make some comments. I believe he's on. And I watched a fascinating debate between him and a government official from the administration in the state recently. Pretty fascinating. And I'll tell you this, Michael, there is some misinformation, and so we've got to deal with facts, right? And it is true. If you look at Alaska statutes, there are some timelines that push back the final counting and releasing of results, because many states do that. That's a little bit of a misnomer, right? There are a lot of states that were still counting for a while because they have to wait on, based on what their statutes say, absentee ballots to come in and final counts. But you release the data as you go and what you get, and everybody can see the trends and the numbers. And there's a statistical point at which candidates can't come back. So they see the trends and how it's breaking, and they've watched this. There's whole organizations that do this for a living, and they go, okay, that race is called, that race is called. I think what people are most frustrated with is the ranked choice voting portion, because not only do we have some statutory requirements that it takes a little bit longer, 7 days, 10 days, whatever the numbers might be. I'd have to go look them up myself again to get them precise. But not only are we delaying those counts for what the statutes say, but then we have to run ranked choice voting on top of that. So the results may not be the results. And when you add to that the parts where they're saying, well, we can't count early. Well, no, actually you can. You can count the early votes early. This is what I was talking about Tuckerman and the discussion they were having, because these are things we've been saying in the legislature for years, trying to pass legislation to update and make this better. And you can absolutely count your early votes and absentees. You can get a lot of that done and have it ready. And you don't hide the information and say, well, we're not going to release anything for 10 days because we don't want people to know. No, what you do for transparency is you count everything you can count and have it ready to go to release the results, on the election night, like most states do. And then you put the raw data out there for what you have, because that shows transparency. You're not hiding anything. People are much less suspicious. And what's all of this drive been for years, Michael? I mean, for me, it has been about restoring people's faith. 2016, what did we see? The left said stolen election, Russian collusion, all debunked. Here we go, right? Then in 2020, then it's the right going, oh, stolen election, here we go. 2024, already seeing the left again going, oh my gosh, so he stole the election, he cheated. Every time, if it's not their person, we're in a different place, which says, I don't trust the election system or the results. I want to get to a place that says, you may not like the results, but you trust them. So when I hear people talk about, oh, we can't do this or we can't do that, I'm like, yes, we can. Number one, there's a lot of things that can be done in policy and regulation. We've talked about this before. I'm going to keep talking about it. I've handed notes on this to the administration for years now of the things that can be done via policy and regulation that don't require statute changes. Some of them I was just mentioning. We don't have to wait to do many of these things, but they do that. And I want to highlight something here. And I was on the Picaro show yesterday talking about it, is that when you look at somebody like Carol Beecher, and a lot of people are directing the angst towards her, Carol inherited a system that was implemented by her predecessor, who had 2 decades or so in the Alaska election system, who we know for a fact is a pretty far left activist that was left in charge of the Division of Elections, Michael. And she's the one that set up and implemented what we're using for ranked choice voting. It was not Carol Beecher. She's dealing with a very imperfect system. So if that's what we are dealing with here, then perhaps the administration under the lieutenant governor will look at this and go, you know what? Maybe we don't want to do these things the way that a previous left-wing director of the Division of Elections set it up. Perhaps we want to do some changes in policy and regulation to make it better, tighter, faster, more transparent to the absolute extent that we can, and then turn and look at the legislature, because there are things that we need to do as well. And some of those, matter of fact, Michael, almost all of those, as you well know, were in the bill that I had with Chris Tuck, including moving up those timelines. Because one of the things we want to do is to have the timeline such that pretty much everything had to be in on the night of the election.
Right.
And they could finish counting, be done, and we could announce the results and be done with it like many states do. Well, that's not fair. Yes, it is. Because whether it's 10 days after the election or on the night of the election, whatever the law says, that's what gets sent out to people. They know what the data says. They know what the law says. They know what the timeline is. And if they don't do it, they're lazy, whatever. That's not our fault. That's their fault as citizens. That's their duty, is to know when they turn it in on time. So that's a long 5-minute Johnny Carson monologue from me right up front. But yes, there are some things that we need to change legislatively. There are a lot of things that can be changed without legislation. And the people of Alaska are frustrated because I think they feel embarrassed, frustrated, looking at the fact that we don't have our results yet, and we still have to run ranked choice voting on top of all of that.
Right.
So we're not even to that point yet.
Well,
So,
and yeah, because the timeline is 10 days for absentee ballots, 10 days past the election, and then for overseas absentee ballots, it's 15 days. which seems like an extraordinarily long time. I mean, if you asked for an absentee ballot, you know when election day is, right? I mean, you know what it is. You asked for it ahead of time, and you should have sent it in before election night, right? It has to be postmarked by election day. Well, why doesn't it have to not be received by election day if that's the case? And I understand that there's some overseas stuff and everything, but if you ask for an overseas ballot, or if you ask for an absentee ballot, you know you're not going to be here. Just vote when you get it done, send it out. I mean, I don't understand why what. And I know there's a lot of states. In fact, there's an article in the the ADN talking about. Well, I don't even know if you can. The whole thing. There's a story about a election office in Cascade County, Montana, where they received a whole bunch of mailed-in ballots from various places around the country, including from Wasilla. The U.S. Postal Service delivered a bunch of different ballots from Washington, Florida, Alaska, other parts of Montana. I mean, yeah, these things are going to take time. You should be mailing these things in, a month before election day.
But is that the fault of the state or the system, Michael, or is that the fault of the citizens? If the state says, any state, right, the government says this is the timeline, you as a citizen have a duty, in this case we're talking about voting, to meet that timeline. Because you couldn't make it there on time because you had a rock in your shoe, because there was tornadoes, locusts. Remember the old Blues Brothers, with John Belushi? It was locust. That's not anybody else's problem. It's like when you show up late to a meeting, right? You just showed up late. It wasn't because you were in a car accident or anything else. So I'm sorry I'm late. Well, that's not my problem. That's your problem, right? For being late to something with the, excluding any, circumstances that people can't control. But sometimes you're just late to a meeting. I was just late. I slept in, I didn't feel good. Well, that's not anybody else's fault. That's yours. If the system says, here's the dates that you need to have stuff turned in by to do your duty as a citizen and your right to vote, and you don't meet that, that's too bad. Your vote no longer counts. And just extending the timeline is like extending adolescence. Well, you're really a teenager, until you're 20, 25, 30, 40. When does it stop? Is it, I can die for my country at 18, pick up a rifle, but I can't drink a beer? I can't vape? I can't smoke? Really? Where does that line get drawn? And do we finally plant the flag in the ground and go, enough? Here's the dates. You get them in by this date and this time, or else it doesn't count. That's on you, Michael. And it doesn't matter when we do that. When we set that up in the statutes, whatever that is, that's what needs to be honored. Because that's the way the system is going to work. And by the way, if we want transparency and we want results, that's how we're going to have to do it. One, repeal ranked choice voting. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Number two, change some of the statutory requirements to get everything in on time, and then force the administration, no matter which one it is, to have these things transparently put out to the public. And, like I said, I was watching that debate online, and it was fascinating because they were talking about early votes and absentees. And I'm just reading that and going, yep, we absolutely can do that if we choose. But we're not. And you got to remember, it's almost like, was it Stalin or Lenin? I think it was Stalin said it doesn't matter, about the votes. It matters who counts the votes. Well, it doesn't really matter what the system, the law says for ranked choice voting. What matters is who set up the procedures, because a lot of it was left pretty vague. And then all of a sudden we have these different things that are happening. And I've been digging into that for years,
right,
in committee. And I know this stuff. And, that's why I was on the other radio program last night, because I realized that Carol Beecher was going to be on, and I wasn't trying to throw any spears at Carol. What I was trying to do was to clarify some of the information, because, for example, he asked about the 113,000 people whose data, which there's many more data breaches than that. This is just one. Remember, Kevin Meyer, Lieutenant Governor Meyer, decided they weren't going to tell us about that data breach that happened a month before the election in 2020. So I propose to you this, Michael, and to your audience: 113,000 Alaskans. To this date, we have never done an audit, the type of audit, because they always want to get twisted. Well, it's not really a forensic audit. Let's talk about just an audit that digs down and finds out, of those 113,000 Alaskans, did they vote? Were they eligible to vote? Were they registered to vote? Are they still alive? Where do they live? Et cetera, et cetera. And then looking and seeing and making sure that it is all legitimate and above board. That has not been done to this date. They talked about, well, we changed some procedures. No, we never checked on all of those people. But we know that data breach had all the voting identifiers that can be used to, for example, request an online ballot. And all you got to do is then fill that sucker out, use those voter identifications, send that ballot in. It gets counted and accepted prima facie from the state, and off we go to the races.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this. Let's just say that, out of the 113,000, 10,000 of them, 10,000, haven't voted forever, or 10 or 12 or 15 years. And all it takes is somebody with that database, Michael, to look at that and go, oh, how tight was the election for ranked choice voting in 2020?
Right.
How tight is it right now in 2024 for repeal? How many votes did somebody have to do that was desperate to get that installed in Alaska to keep Lisa Murkowski in office, who's been a reliable Democrat vote, who needs this as a springboard across the nation to install ranked choice voting? Do you think that a nefarious group out there that has access to this data on the dark web wouldn't be willing to go pick up a couple thousand votes and make sure they get sent in? That's never been done by the state to guarantee this isn't happening to us right now. Michelle works the polls. She works one of the stations up here, runs the Mockatons, and she's been doing the poll watching with others. We're still getting ballots from overseas. I know that there's almost 1,000 different registered folks on our ballots or on our registry, Michael, that are from like China, Uzbekistan, Iran, Venezuela. Why do I know? Because I looked at it and read them all years ago. So what I'm trying to get across to people is that we're not doing our due diligence as government to guarantee the sanctity of our election system, our voter rolls, which are the worst in the nation. We already know that. We've discussed it, so I won't repeat that. But there are many things like that when they say, well, we've changed some stuff. We're not doing all that we can do to enhance the security of our election system, the transparency of our election system, and people's faith in the system.
Right.
And those are things we need to desperately be doing right now. Yes, I'm on a bit of a rant. I know. I'll stop.
Well, that brings
told
us
you I have a first cup of coffee.
I know you've had your coffee already. That brings us up to the first break. We'll be back with more. State Senator Mike Shower is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Mike Shower is our guest. We're continuing on. Since we're in the break, we'll sidebar a little bit. I saw that you commented, and I didn't post your comment.
That's fine. I was just listening for the first segment.
Yeah, for the first segment. Do we not pay more already for the cost of American labor by comparison to cheap foreign labor? I mean, yes, but does that mean you want to pay even more, I guess, is my question. I mean, this idea that somehow that we can force manufacturing back to America by basically pricing foreign goods out of the market is, I really think that it's a fool's errand, because again, there are whole industries that would have to be stood up, and the infrastructure, the costs involved in the long run would be, astronomical for some of these things. There's just some things that we could not afford to bring back and stand up here when the rest of the world could get it for it would put us at an economic disadvantage, I would think. What are your thoughts on that first segment?
That's why I said it the way I said it, Michael. You might be reading the context a little different. I'm trying to make the point of, we can't compete on the world stage right now when an American auto worker, for example, is going to have to be paid because of union requirements to say, call it $80 an hour, when they can make the same vehicle in China, in essence, for $10 an hour. Or you're going to pick those bananas they talked about somewhere down south, and they pay them, 50 cents an hour to work, but it requires, 10 or 12 or $15 an hour. Remember that minimum wage thing up here in the U.S.? Right. That's kind of my point. As I look at it here, we're already paying more for products made here because of the cost of American labor. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is we're already paying that cost. And I'm not disagreeing on how tariffs are not going to be a savior for us. Frankly, I will agree with Vivek and Elon on this particular point, that the biggest danger, the most existential threat to our nation really is the debt, the spending of our federal government. And that really includes state governments too, because Alaska is there and the rest of them. If you really want to look at what's going to destroy this nation, it's going to be our propensity as governments to spend money that we don't have and leverage that debt to the point we can't survive it. If you really want to make things come back and bring manufacturing and people go, I want to do business here, et cetera, you would need to stop the spending so everybody stops being taxed. A more existential threat, I believe, to our nation than tariff policies or politics or almost anything else, right? Because that is literally bankruptcy. A couple of years ago, I've talked about it in the program, we had one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I forget which one at this point, and he actually named that. He said, you want to know, and he said it because he was asked in the congressional, might have been the Senate. He goes, what's your number one threat, General, to the United States? He goes, the debt. He didn't even hesitate.
Yeah,
and he launched into a diatribe about it.
That was Bulldog Mattis, right? I mean, he said that because
I think it was.
Yeah, it was Bulldog Mattis who said the debt is the number one national security. I mean, that was kind of shocking because they were expecting him to go off about, China or Iran whatever, or somebody else, and he was like, no, the debt. I remember that day because I was like, you go, man, you go. Because it's the truth. It is the number one thing. I mean, Eric Boehm was just talking about that, back in the day, if we wanted to trade tariff for taxes. Well, back in the day, the federal government only spent 3% of GDP. Now it's 24%. 24% is consumed by government. And they're borrowing money at this just unsustainable clip. I mean, and nobody seems to want to stop. Nobody wants to stop it. Neither side wants to stop it. And I'm just like, wow.
Not enough. There are a few, but not enough of either side or one side is willing to take the steps and the political cost it's going to cost them individually to actually do what needs to be done. There are some budget hawks that are trying. I've certainly done it. I've put in tons and tons of cuts, always shot down. There's always a group of Republicans and, of course, almost all the Democrats that are more than happy to spend money. As I've told you, I was told early on in my political career, Mike, you don't have a constituency if you don't spend money, i.e. through the government to the lobbyists to the ones that are going to turn around and give you PAC money and union money to keep you in that seat so they keep getting the feet at the trough. The whole thing is a vicious cycle, right? It's like the FDA inspectors. They go work in the agriculture for a while, then they come back into the FDA, then they go back.
Revolving door.
Big pharma, they all do it.
Yeah, it's the revolving door. Let's hope that this DOGE, this Department of Governmental Efficiency, actually does something. We'll see what happens with that. All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right. I'm tired of being kicked around by that guy. Let's continue on. Mike Shower is our guest. A state senator from District O. He comes on usually every week to give us whatever's on his mind. He's had coffee today, so he's extra dangerous today.
I'm on cup 2 now. You're in trouble.
Yeah, you're seriously in trouble. So what about the? I know you kind of finished your election diatribe there, but I don't want to get off that for a second because, this election cycle, and I mean, Carol Beecher is the director. She's working under things that she didn't set up. I understand that, but really the buck's got to stop somewhere, right? And we had 3 or 4 major problems with this election, whether it was the sample ranked choice ballot with Harris's name on it, whether it was the casting Mia Costello as a Democrat, sending the wrong ballots to parts of rural Alaska and allowing a bunch of people to vote them before they figured it out. I mean, it's just this never-ending cycle. And now we're seeing again this report from the Associated Press of all these ballots, and not just Alaska ballots, but various ballots ending up around the around at different locations around the country and everything else. I mean, something's got to happen. I mean, I don't think that there's some big underarching conspiracy here to steal an election. I don't personally feel that. Maybe somebody else out there does. But there is a question of the confidence in I mean, I do have concerns about election integrity. I don't think that there's a conspiracy, but I do have concerns based on all the things that I'm seeing. And with our own division of elections making some of these mistakes were pretty rookie mistakes. That does not instill confidence for me right now.
Well, isn't that all what we're talking about here, Michael? When I brought up what I did about the 113,000 Alaskans and the possibility of it being used fraudulently, I didn't claim anywhere in there, because they'll always say that, right? I didn't claim it happened. I said, what we don't know is that it didn't happen. And we're never going to know if it did or did not happen or could unless we do something about it. And doing something about it involves the type of audit that would allow you to run down those 113,000 people and look at their voting record, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's everything you're talking about. I'm looking for the transparency and the faith in the system. If we have these vulnerabilities, if we don't fix these things, we're not going to be able to restore that faith in the system because people will never trust it. If we hide data, don't release it, we wait, and then do it, well, that's going to be a problem too, right? Because then people go, okay, something's happening. I see all this stuff in the comments out there. It's like, well, they're just waiting until they can count enough or find enough ballots. I'm like, here we go again, right? And you got the left, oh, it's been cheated. It's definitely not valid this time. It was valid in 2020, but it's not good anymore. I mean, this is how it continues to swing back and forth. So you got to tighten this whole thing up. And there's ways to do that. I don't disagree with you. I'm not going to give Lieutenant Governor Dahlstrom or Carol Beach a pass if I see things happening that shouldn't be happening, because like you said, regardless of whether I like them or not or get along with them, even if I do something right as a state senator, I should be called. If I do something wrong, I should be called out, because that is where the buck stops, right? That's the reality of leadership. You get the good when things happen, but guess what? You get hit over the head when the bad stuff happens, even if it's not your fault. People go, oh, Trump did X, Y, Z when COVID hit. Well, it wouldn't have really mattered who the president was when COVID hit, because that was going to wipe out just about everything, right? So it didn't matter who you were or how well liked you were. There's almost nothing you could do. And frankly, he made mistakes. He was rolling out the vaccines and a whole bunch of other stuff at warp speed, thought it was the right thing. In retrospect, maybe not so much. Point being, Michael, is that we as government and as people at the top in certain position, yes, you are correct. The buck stops here. So if there are mistakes being made, then that falls on the shoulders of the director of the Division of Elections and ultimately on Lieutenant Governor Dahlstrom, because that's one of her very few purviews as a lieutenant governor. That's her lane, is elections. So those type of mistakes we can't make. Now, let me say one more thing in addition to that. Do you think in Juneau, Alaska, that the Division of Elections is full of a bunch of Matsu conservatives working?
Probably not.
Probably not. And do you think there might be a whole bunch of Gail Funami trained acolytes still working in that system?
Oh, well, I think that's a given at that point.
Exactly. So when you look and see things like a certain former Senate staffer who's working in an organization that was contracted by people from Juneau to make that ballot up, and knowing that that certain staffer hates Trump, hates conservatives, and then it comes out of the organization that's this off to the side that was contracted by the, do you think, Michael, there might be a connection there? See, that's what I'm trying to say. A lot of people don't see the dots and you don't connect them. When you sit back and start seeing the bigger picture and your nose is not right on the mosaic where all you can see is what's 3 inches in front of your face, you start taking the step 10 feet back, things start to come into focus. And you start seeing this person worked there, did that over here with this group who pays them, and the whole thing starts to kind of come into focus. And it's like back to ranked choice voting again and looking at the numbers. Why were they so desperate to pass ranked choice voting? Why am I so suspicious and concerned about there may have been a fraud with the 113,000 Alaskans data stolen right before something that dark wing money under Arabella Advisors, 1630 Fund, United America, George Soros, all those different players dumping money into Alaska to get ranked choice voting, and then it barely passes with just enough.
Right
After a massive data breach of the Division of Elections in our state. And then we see the same kind of thing happening now, and we don't really know. And all of a sudden, with all the absentee ballots coming in, including, as Michelle said, seeing a bunch of overseas ones come in, and from rural Alaska that took a long time to turn them in. And all of a sudden, Nick Begich is getting really close to Potola. And all of a sudden, we're seeing ballot measure 2 that was doing really good. Now, all of a sudden, it's barely losing where it wasn't before. And to have confidence in the system, you have to know that every eligible person that is registered is actually eligible, and it's not something else taking place. And so I looked at the math, and I've heard 14 million is the number, 21 million, different numbers that was spent. When you include big unions and all the money and free labor they dump into it, it's way more than 14 million, right? To save ranked choice voting in Alaska, because they can't let it be repealed here, Michael. It kills the national narrative. And a lot of states did a good job of shutting it down this time. I was very happy to see that. But Alaska is one of those weird cases, right? And if they spent that, I did the math, and I sent this to Izon, who was working the Yes on 2 and others, because they're still talking about it. We'll see where it goes. if you do the math and divide just 730,000 Alaskans by 14 million, that's all I use is that number. That's about $20 per Alaskan. They inundated the airways with that. You go, well, $20 is not much, but let me do another little bit of math for you. Imagine they tried to do this in California with the better part of 40 million people, and they spent $14 million. That's about 35 cents a person. They spent 57 times more than that to saturate our tiny little market up here, Michael. 57 times more per person here. And it would have cost $800 million for them to do the same thing in California to give you perspective.
That's why they did it, because, and then they said it, Alaska's a cheap date. And
correct.
And again, you go back to your vote doesn't matter. I mean, right now, the repeal is now behind by only 45 votes, with about 5,800 votes left to count, is what they're saying right now. About 5,800 votes left to count for tomorrow. They're saying, or today, I guess. They're saying 45 votes. That's I mean, that's tight. And like you said, if it's onesies and twosies, and we don't know what happened to the data breach and what happened there, 45 votes. If it comes down to that, oh man, there's going to be some questions.
Well, who's validating, Michael? I asked you the question. Let's ask the hard questions of the Division of Election. Who's validating that those votes coming in from overseas are good, that they're actually registered and it's who they say they are? Who's checking that? What data are they doing background investigation to know that it's who it is? Or do they accept it prima facie? Do you know the answer?
I don't. What is
they accept it prima facie? That's it. So if the ballot comes in and it's got the appropriate markings on it, they go, that's good. That's all they need. Because that's as far as we go, Michael. It says right in our own statutes, you have to be an Alaska citizen. There is a lady that was doing training up here in the Matsu. I talked to her personally because she reached out. She was so desperate to another Republican who said, you need to call Mike Shower. So she did. She was sitting in the training. They didn't know who she was sitting in the training because another lady invited her. So she just showed up. This is for the election worker training. They were being told, Michael, this is validated. They were being told you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. Now, you and I can both go for 60 seconds online and find out that that is an absolute lie and a violation of the law. You have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. But yet they're being trained not to do that. So you go back to, is it really as tight and secure as we think it is? If you have workers who believe you don't have to be a U.S. citizen, who are setting up ballots that we know to be wrong, who are allowing these things that you just mentioned a few minutes ago to happen all the way up to the director, do you really think that the people's faith is going to be restored in a system with these types of issues? Or that we are not willing to take the steps needed to make sure that we get it where it's going to be? And now we look at our election results, and you're going to have probably both bodies. Again, even with more Republicans, so-called, in the legislature in both bodies, you're going to have Democrat-dominated majorities in both bodies once again. How well do you think it's going to work out for us this 2-year session to get anything that's going to make the election system tighter or better? The chance of that is virtually zero. Because what they're going to want to do is go same-day registration, all mail-out balloting, all of the left-wing stuff that they can't wait to have happen to turn us into California or Oregon or Washington. That's what they want. That's their goal, Michael. So it's going to be frustrating again for another 2 years, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to tell you, because we're not going to probably get anything good unless the lieutenant governor and governor come out swinging on our side and saying, we want one or two or a couple of these things to happen in legislation, and you're going to do it, or else you're not going to get your other stuff. And without that kind of help, we're not going to get that done. I'm going to be in another it's going to be a Republican caucus. And it ain't going to be what it was the last 2 years, but I'm here to tell you, you're going to see an announcement today come out of the so-called majority in the Senate, and it's going to be a Democrat-dominated group again, even though there's more Republicans. Here we go, right? So when you look at where we stand, here we go once again with Alaska. And thank God the U.S. Senate doesn't operate this way, because you go, hey, they got 53 or 54. The Republicans got it. Yeah, well, if that was Alaska, that wouldn't be the case, because 3 or 4 or 5 of them would go join the Democrats, and the Democrats would be in charge again.
Right.
Strangely. So that is something that we have to deal with. That is the reality. But let me give you one more thing, because I listened to that broadcast yesterday, and I had to go on after that just to clarify some things.
Right.
Because again, I'm not blaming Carol for this. She's dealing with the system, but she also doesn't know all the data. For example, ballot tracking. So, because that was some of the questions I was listening to Bacaro asked about the 113,000 that was anything done, ballot tracking, some other kind of things came up, and the ballot tracking. Well, when you show up in person, I'm like, never answered the question, because the answer to the question, Michael, is we don't track the ballots in this state. We don't have a ballot tracking system. That apps are available right now we could use as a state, just implement it and do it, because these things can be done by the administration. We could have a ballot tracking system right now with watermarks on the ballots, QR codes, you name it. And just like you can track your pizza or a FedEx package anywhere on the planet to the minute, we don't know where the ballots are, when they've actually been scanned in. Did they make it back to the Division of Elections and you actually voted? Unless you want to run that down, which most citizens don't do, we don't track the ballots. And they say, well, we get all the ballots back. No, you don't. I know you don't, because I've had people reach out to me in different polling stations around the state. One of them up, I think it was Eagle, Alaska. And she's like, well, she saw this and she testified for us. And she's like, I'm like, can you tell me what happens? And she goes, well, yeah. She's like, we get the extra ballots, we just burn them. I'm like, say what? Yeah, well, I was told that we bring these all back. She's like, no, we've been doing that for years. I've been up here for 20-something years. So the point, Michael, is it's not consistent.
Right.
I don't think we really have the control we think we do of this, and it is not secure like people think it is. And then let's go to the last point.
Quickly. I got it.
I got it.
Okay.
But the Shabaka, where is it? He asked about that, and she's like, it's in. Carol's answer was it was privileged information. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not privileged because it's a public report, and it's in the greater public interest that information is released. At least, Michael, to sitting legislators. Come on, so we can do our job.
Right.
Still out there.
Still going on. Still happening. All right.
So you started this, by the way. You asked me
did.
about elections. Here we go.
It's all my fault. I fully take full acceptable responsibility for this. That's exactly what it is. All right, we're going to continue here. One final segment dead ahead. Mike Shower is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I find it interesting that there's already apps out there for tracking ballots and everything. I mean, I was always wondering, why don't we have, numbered ballots or QR codes or whatever else like that? Because that would seem to just make sense, especially with the absentee and the mail-in ballots. That would just seem to make sense so that you know where all these are at any given time. The fact
any given time, and you know who voted, and you know that they're registered and eligible and registered. All of those things can be then audited in the future because we have electronic records detailing all of it. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, and it's especially when you imagine the person who had from Wasilla that had their ballot show up in Montana, and they'll be like, their app says it's in Helena, Montana. You're like, well, wait a second. How does that bag of ballots that got found out by the airport post office area out there after the primary that Kevin was just bringing up? I mean, what about those guys? This is it. Look, there's so many questions about things that have happened during this last election cycle alone. And again, I'm not saying that there's some big conspiracy. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But at the same time, somebody's got to stand up and take responsibility and say this will never happen again. And instead, it's like crickets and radio silence. We don't hear anything about it. Bryce Edgman voted the wrong ballot, right? And then was like, oh, wait, I just realized that those judges weren't the judges in my district, and it's like, okay, so even, but does anybody, the one guy quit the day before elections. You saw that. Apparently it was such a poo parade that he's like, you know what? I'm washing my hands of this. I'm walking out. But no other real word, no ideas, no things like we're going to fix it. And again, the whole report thing, that just infuriates me. This is a public report. And they're like, no, it's privileged information. No, it's a public report paid for by tax dollars that we should know what's going on. Why will you not release the information?
I don't know, Michael. That's a great question. One I've been asking for years. And I'm not asking it trying to pin anybody to the wall. I'm trying to get the information so I can look at that 3.5 pages of recommendations. So as a sitting legislator, I can go, look, I've got data to help me guide making legislation that will improve upon or fix these issues that were identified in the report. That's the only reason I've asked for it, not for anything else, not to get anybody in trouble or make them look bad. I go, I need to do my job. And if there's a report that has good information that helps me do my job, can I see that, please? Sure. Under the threat of being sued, if you talk about it, kind of defeats the purpose. So it is frustrating because as much as I am aligned and get along with most of the people, et cetera, administration and otherwise, it is frustrating when you are stymied from doing your job by something that should be released to make the people that did it a hero by going, look what we found. We're going to fix it. Instead, we didn't. And it's, again, incredibly frustrating for all of us, I think, in this particular case. So, I mean, I don't know. I've tried, Michael. I've been trying for 7.5 years. I filed legislation. We almost got some of it across the finish line until Schrage and all those guys screwed it up on the Democrat side a couple of years ago. We almost got Sarah Vance's bill through until, some of the Democrats loaded it up with a bunch of Democrat stuff, and we could have at least been cleaning up our voter rolls a little cleaner. We almost get to the finish line a few times, and we always find a way to snatch, defeat from the jaws of victory. So it's just like, boy, it gets very frustrating. And I hear you guys on the radio. I know you guys are as well, but trust me, nobody is more frustrated than the guy sitting there in Juneau beating his head against the wall, giving up, time and money from my family to try to make things better. And it is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, Donna and Tuckerman, I know they're on your thread here watching this. They were down there beating their head against the wall too. They get it. And others.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I mean, at some point the governor should step in. And I know that the Division of Elections is the lieutenant governor's purview, yada, yada, yada. But at some point, somebody needs to step in and say, this is a public report. Now, if it incriminates somebody or makes somebody look bad, that's too bad. It's a public report. I mean, we've been waiting for this thing for 3 years, and it's there, but you can't look at it without signing an NDA. You can't look at it without it having, 90% of it being redacted. I mean, at some point, it's like, we're not talking about nuclear secrets here. We're talking about how to make the Division of Elections work more efficiently. And if they can't share that with the public, unless we're talking about some technical cybersecurity issue or something, that I can understand why parts of that may be redacted. But if you got to redact 90% of the report, you're hiding something, and the governor should step in.
I don't disagree. I wish Mike would step in and do that. Like many things, Michael, I think that lawyers run a lot of what happens in this nation, both companies and government. And my guess is the lawyers are going, you can't do that. Don't do this. Here's all the possible wrong. Look, we get it from Ledge Legal. And I'll stop because I know the ding there. But lawyers run so much of this country. And frankly, while I know there's some very good lawyers out there and I'm friends with some, I think lawyers have nearly run us into the ground on so many levels. And they make it so complicated. It's hard to actually do the job.
Yeah.
Because they stop you from doing it. So.
All right. Well, let's jump back into it. One final segment, the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, yada, yada.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
All right, State Senator Mike Shower is our guest. We're getting ready to finish up here. One final segment dead ahead. We've been talking about elections because obviously it's on everybody's mind, and it's a hot mess. The whole thing with again, I'm not saying that there's some kind of conspiracy, but I'm saying that even the appearance of impropriety, or even the fact that a lot of people have a distrust of what's going on, is problematic, to say the least. Now, Shelley Hughes is working on a new bill already. She's already planning to propose legislation intending to prohibit the Division of Elections from counting absentee ballots received after Election Day. This was announced in the ADN late last night or this morning. Mike, have you seen this? Have you talked to her about it? Can you give us any details or what your thoughts are on it?
She hasn't talked to me specifically about it, which I'm great with other legislators jumping on the election reform bandwagon. The more the merrier. Certainly need the help. because I've kind of been out there on my own a lot, at least in the Senate for some time, which is fine. I mean, you kind of get to a point where everybody's in their lane of doing things. You can only have so much resource, right, and time to fight the different battles, and we've got 1,000 battles. So I welcome any more input or legislators on board with it. Shelley and I, in the Republican caucus, not the bipartisan coalition, will probably have a difficult time moving these things. Isn't it funny? I'm gonna rabbit hole for a second because you just made me think of something here. But just off the topic for a moment, it was interesting because I heard, of course, the bipartisan coalition was courting certain Republicans, trying to get them to join, because the more Republicans they can get to join, the more top cover the rest of them have, right? And I heard one of them had asked, hey, join us, Bob, we'll get you this, we'll get you that, promise them the moon, try to get them on board, which is never going to work out well for a lot of us in our districts, right, if you sell your soul for that. And that person said, well, why don't we just do a committee of the whole? And, let's do all 20. And it was like, well, we can't do that. And that person said, well, wait a minute. You have far left radicals like Lukey Tobin, Elby Gray Jackson, Forrest Dunbar. You include them in your bipartisan coalition, but you don't include conservatives like, Yunt, Myers, Hughes, Shower. How is that a balanced and reasonable bipartisan coalition? It's not bipartisan. It's a well left of center coalition. Look at the names.
Right, democratically
there might
controlled.
Be a few Republicans in there,
yeah.
But that's my point. So it's funny how to be bipartisan in Alaska, it's got to be well left of center to be bipartisan, because the radical leftists are included, but not the people that are more conservative. You see how that works? Something.
I mean, I see how it works. I don't believe how it works, but I do see how it works.
Well, you believe it, brother, because it works for them, not for the state, and not for the people that voted for Republicans to be in charge. But it definitely works to their advantage, because that's how it works. But I just had to mention that because I think it's amusing in a twisted way that it's bipartisan and it's a coalition and it's working across the aisle. No, it's only working across the aisle for the leftist Democrats, because they get to be included every time. The conservatives in these bipartisan groups are always excluded. Funny how that works in Alaska. Funny. And it was like Kopp and Stutz. Look at those two. They're already, as I predicted they would be, have already joined the Democrats. They joined the Democrats before the election was over. So tried to tell people that and warn them and go, they're going to join the Democrats. They did it multiple times before. And so now you're back to 18 Republicans at the moment and waiting to see what's going to happen on the 19th and et cetera, et cetera. And once again, a couple Republicans are going to hand the entire body over to the leftist Democrats. And you got to start asking yourself the question, when are people going to wake up? When are we going to fight the battles, Mike, as a Republican Party and figure out how to get the resources needed to get that message out? Because we don't have the kind of money they have in lower 48. You got to look at that and just, it. You've been in this game for a while. We don't have that kind of resource, right? We couldn't even generate enough money to fight $14 to $20 million of dark money in this state to buy literally a proposition. They bought it, just like they bought it in 2020 with dark money. They bought it again in 2024. That's what it looks like is going to happen. We've got to figure out how to get the resources, Michael. If we're going to fight these battles, you got to have money to counter the negative message, to tell the truth, to get enough people to know. And we don't do that very well. And Alaska is so small, we don't have that kind of resource.
Well, and it's been proven. It's been proven by what's happened here recently that money is what is making things happen. All right. I mean, $14 million to convince people, $14 million from outside to convince people in Alaska on how to vote. And it obviously is getting close to working. I mean, we got a 45 vote difference between the two right now. Phil Eison and his crew only had $100,000.
If I had $2 million, it'd probably be 60. It'd be over. Not even close. If I had $2 million to counter the lies of the no on two people, the Scott Kindles and the rest of them, this wouldn't even be a question. But when you're outspent 100 to 1, how do you overcome those kind of numbers when they inundate the airways, when they lie through their teeth? And by the way, I'm saying on the radio, I haven't said anywhere else yet, I'm sending a letter to the Attorney General. I'm going to request an investigation into the no on two, because I believe they broke the law. The dark money is slimy, unethical. I got all that, but it is legal, right? But what is not legal in Alaska statutes is a violation of the law is to electioneer, is to knowingly put out false information that's going to influence the outcome of an election. And the no on two people did that.
Right.
I've had flyers sent to me that were telling people out in rural Alaska, you're going to lose your reproductive rights if you vote to repeal ranked choice voting.
Right.
We know what they did with the military and flat out
Right.
lied.
You wouldn't be able to vote unless you joined a party in the military
That's right.
and all that kind of
That's
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So if they're going to lie about it, Michael, which is a violation of the law, then our attorney general needs to get on board and he needs to investigate this. And when I believe, as I believe they would find there was a violation of the law, then people need to be indicted and charged. Because that's one of the ways we're going to stop this garbage, is allowing people to get away with breaking the law, because that is a violation of the law. I've read the statutes and I'm going to send it to them in the next couple of days. And I'm going to request a formal investigation into the no on two, because they bought and paid for a proposition with money and then lied. And you can't do that, Michael. And unless we start holding people accountable to the law, this is going to keep happening to us. And unless we figure out a way to start building up a war chest to fight these outside forces that keep influencing our elections, Alaskans are going to have to step up and figure out how to do it. And we're going to need help from the lower 48. We're not going to be able to do it by ourselves.
No, we need to create.
I'm looking to see what wins.
We need to create an Alaskan war chest. Yeah, we need to create an Alaskan war chest for sure.
Yes, we do, because we keep saying, "Oh, let's just keep voting them out." Well, how's that working for us? It's not. We're going to fight this and we're going to vote harder. Well, that's not working out for us.
Yeah.
You know what we need, Michael? You know what we don't have? You know what they do is money. Yeah. Like it or not, folks, it's money. And if we had the war chest to fight these things, we can win easily in most cases. And we can help candidates. Like I watched Stanley Wright and David Nelson down in Anchorage, right on the cusp of winning. But there's no resource to hand them $50,000 to make sure they counter the union money that flows in, or Savannah Fletcher versus Mike Cronk. Thank goodness he won. But I mean, she got 100-something thousand of union money. Look at the Matt Claiman, a couple 100,000 in union. We don't have the resources, Michael. We need to learn how to fight fire with fire. Right. We need to learn how to fundraise and have a war chest available to us to fight back. Yeah. Money matters. It is not evil. It's the love of money that was evil. Money is a tool, and we need to learn to get that money so we can fight back.
And I would say that the only downside to what you're saying, and I would love to see it, I would love to see somebody get prosecuted, go to jail, be fined, do all that stuff. It still doesn't change the outcome of the election, which is the unfortunate part. But maybe it will stop the next time. You got 90. You got 90 seconds here. 90 seconds.
That is what I'm looking at, right? Because you're always playing the long. We better be playing the long game. Unfortunately, we play the short game too much and lose. We better start looking at the long game. One of the long games is, you want people that are bad actors that keep doing this garbage up here. You want them off the chessboard. Then you better take them off the board. And how you do that is, if you're breaking the law, you put them in jail. You prosecute them and go, do it again. You're going back to jail. And maybe next time they won't do it. And maybe people won't send money up here that are going to have a tie to them that becomes federal money. How's that work out? Let's think about that for just 1 second, because I know we got about 45 seconds and I'll be done. But think about the federal nexus, Michael. There's people and groups down south that are sending money up here and then they're violating the law with it. Ooh, that's crossing state lines. That may not just be the state of Alaska looking at them. It may be other agencies looking at them on the federal level. That's how we fight back and fight fire with fire. There's many ways, but we've got to use all the tools in our toolbox, and we're not. And if we want to start winning, folks, we're going to have to learn how to put on the boots and wade into the pigsty and start kicking the pig in the mud. You don't want to wrestle with them.
Right.
Like the farmer said, you just get dirty and the pig likes it. But you better learn how to start kicking back with some boots on, because we're losing and we don't have to.
Yeah, so, exactly. An Alaskan war chest would go a long way to making that happen, but we will need help from outside. That's 100% sure. All right, well, we're out of time for today. Tomorrow is Thursday, folks. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you tomorrow, The Michael Duke Show. Can you not wind this person up so much, says Harold?
Oh. It's the funniest thing, Michael. People think I get wound up like that, and I do, but it's not like I'm like about to explode, because I've learned how to do that, right? I can meter. It's like in the fighter world, flying jets, right? It's like you have hours of boredom with minutes of sheer terror and so much happening, and then it's over. You go right back to just flying home, right? Like nothing happened. So I can spin up and down in seconds. It's not a big deal. Oh my gosh, the guy's on fire. I'm like, yeah, but not like crazy. I mean, I can literally throttle it right back to idle. Like
right.
Nothing.
It's passion. Funny. That's what passion is. And you're looking at this stuff, and again, I'm so frustrated by the whole situation right now between the screw ups this time around, the reporting, the the lying during the election campaigns. We saw that from several organizations and quite honestly from candidates. And
Yep,
I mean,
very good.
somebody needs to get their their pee smacked on this deal. They need to pay the piper. And I know somebody, I think it was Lynn, said that it's a calculated risk. They knew they could be sued, but they knew it wouldn't matter in the long run because it would be after the election. And those kind of calculuses need to stop. It needs to be so the penalties need to be so, brutal that they don't factor that into a calculation, right? That's like the car companies knowing that one of their cars is going to kill people, but it's cheaper to just, pay it out than it is to recall all the cars, or, those kind of calculuses need to go away. And it's the same thing if they knew that there was a chance of a lawsuit for lying and they think they're going to get away with it because they'll run the ad for a week or 10 days and then they'll pull it. Oh yeah, you're right. It was wrong. There should be a penalty. And I would like to see that for sure.
So if somebody commits murder but then comes back to, I didn't mean to, I know it was wrong, we shouldn't put them in jail? I mean, I know that's not what you're saying. Right. But I mean, that's like the argument of going, well,
exactly.
No,
it's a calculus of can I get away with it and survive the legal challenge kind of thing.
And the only way you're going to get to the point, it's like dealing with your children. If the children realize that the punishment is so great versus the reward, you'll modify their behavior. If you make it so painful that people go to jail and go, I don't want to do that again. And then somebody else looks at it and goes, hey, let's do this thing. They go, you know what? I just watched my buddy, over here just go to jail for that. I'm not interested. That's how you're going to modify behavior. That's why we have laws like this, is to put people away for bad behavior and go, don't do it again.
Yeah, so exactly. Well, that was this was the theory behind public hangings, right? They wouldn't do it anymore because of that. I'm not saying we bring that back, but I'm just saying that was the theory behind it. They're like, ooh, I don't want to dance at the end of a rope like that. That's what it's all about.
Well, I got to tell you, I am a fan of capital punishment. I know that makes some liberal heads explode, but I'm like, Michael, the best deterrent is watching somebody else lose their life for doing a heinous crime like murdering a child or, torture. I mean, just the most heinous of crimes. And that would probably be the best deterrent we have because, one, you take them out of the gene pool completely. And that deterrent is like, yeah, I don't want to hang from the gallows. I'm not going to do that even if I was tempted. So you're not going to stop every bad actor. But why would? Yeah, that's a whole other.
That's a whole show. That's a whole show right there. Yeah, no, I know. I brought that.
I'll just stop that one right there.
Yeah, no, it's all good. All right. Well, Mike Shower, thank you so much. Somebody asked earlier. They were asking, are you doing a turkey for Thanksgiving? And since we're not going to be here next week, are you doing turkey for Thanksgiving? Is that the plan?
We always do turkey and we always do a ham, and we've invited some friends over. The family's gone, so we got a few extras this year. But yes, we always do turkey. We always do ham. I know we've talked about this in the program. The continuous Shower family battle is always over mashed potatoes versus rice. Now, I don't know where you sit, brother, but I might lose respect for you if you say anything other than mashed potatoes. I'm not trying to influence your vote.
No, I
am telling you, if you tell me it's not mashed potatoes, we may not be friends anymore.
We do mashed potatoes and scallop potatoes, and we might do rice this year too. I mean, I'm one for why not both? I mean, for me, it's why not both?
That's what we do.
The more food, the merrier.
We do both.
Yeah, the more food, the merrier at that point. Although I don't do a ham. My ham is my Christmas thing. That's my Christmas thing. Okay. Is the honey, is the brown sugar and bourbon glazed. My father's recipe, brown sugar bourbon glazed ham, whole bone in shank ham. And then of course later on we pull the ham bone out and we do split pea soup and all kinds of stuff.
We do the same. But that's why we do it both times, because I want to have it at Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Oh, I see.
And we do both because of that reason.
Oh, we do Christmas and Easter, so we still get it twice a year, but we gotta do what we're doing there. All right.
Oh, dude, you're making my mouth water with these. It is awesome. I wish you, my friend, a happy Thanksgiving. Obviously, we won't talk next week after that, see how it's going. But we'll miss everybody next week. And I apologize for the last 2 weeks, everybody. The first 2 weeks ago after the election, I was sick. I was up till 4 a.m. I just couldn't do it. And last week I was in a undisclosed location where I didn't have access to be able to call you, so I was kind of stuck.
Yeah, well, those skiffs are hard to get out of. You know what I mean? Anyway, I appreciate. I appreciate. Sorry, that's military humor. All right,
that's highly classified.
That's highly classified.
Yeah, you're going to have some visits from some men in black suits here in a few minutes.
I know exactly.
Knock.
Yeah,
Dukes,
exactly.
open the door.
All right, my friend. Well, as always, it's good to talk with you. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you again in a couple of weeks.
You as well, my friend. Thank you. And to all of your listeners out there, same thing. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Be safe, take care, and we will talk to you in a couple weeks.
Thanks so much, Mike Shower, our guest here on the program. Swanson TV dinner, man. You need to up your game there, Chris. Swanson TV dinners for me, he says. And then Jeannie says Coca-Cola ham. Never done it. Might never do it. All right, my friends. Well, we are out of time. We will see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you coming on board and joining us tomorrow. We will have some election results because they're going to do the ranked choice tabulation tonight. So we'll know more. I don't know if we'll know it all, but we'll know more tomorrow. Have a great day. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. We'll see you then.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.